Kyle Bowen here with me today. He is the owner of Hourglass Leadership. He will tell you a lot more about it than I can. So let him take it from here. Kyle, if you will just tell us a little bit more about you, how you've gotten to this point, and what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I'm Kyle Bowen. I'm the founder and president of Hourglass Leadership. We're a leadership development company that helps businesses care for and grow their team through an app we developed. So we aren't the leadership coach, we aren't the leadership consultant. We're in the business of empowering you to create a culture where everybody feels invested in, has a clear growth plan, and knows that you value them on a personal basis. And so we say that we slam shut the revolving door of turnover caused by low employee engagement and poor leadership. We also, our app functions as a delivery vehicle for coaches who are looking to fill in the gap between coaching sessions through content, through goal setting and tracking, through feedback, and through meeting action items. And so we're working with coaches, we're working with small to large businesses, we're working with anybody who deeply cares about their people and wants to help them grow. So, yeah, that's a little bit about me. In terms of how I got here, I did 5 years of church ministry. That's what my degrees are in. Never really imagined myself doing anything different, but God, a couple times in my life, has steered me in unexpected directions. And so I ended up working at Chick-fil-A. Kind of promised God I would be here a year max because I did not want to be in the fast food industry. And He gradually grew my heart through a lot of gut-wrenching prayer and yelling at God and all that stuff to realizing that empowering and investing in fast food team members was a wonderful form of ministry that many people weren't looking into. Like, there are lots of people who want to work at a suburban church. There are not many people who are helping team members find belief in themselves and reach their goals. And I get to have some really cool conversations about God in the process because when people are asking, why are you caring for me when nobody else has in my life? You get to really say, well, because Jesus did. And that's Jesus's whole ministry is caring for people who aren't at the front of society. And so I got to bring that into the Chick-fil-A restaurant and care for people nobody else was. So it was cool. I did 6 years of that, growing in leadership development. And then we decided it was time to take some of the systems that had really been working for us at Chick-fil-A, helping us improve our retention by 15 to 20%, decrease turnover by over 25%, stuff like that. Package it with an app, and then me helping provide some systems and help other businesses solve that problem. Because a lot of business owners in our community back in Abilene were going, hey, we have these problems, y'all don't. How are you doing it? And so we're like, okay, what if we help these people so they aren't struggling as much? So yeah, that's a little bit about myself, what we do, and how I got there.
That's awesome. As you were saying that, the quote that says, "If you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans," came to mind. It's like that's a journey of entrepreneurship. It's this journey of one, expecting how life is going to go and then finding out it's not going to go that way. And two, I think it's like this, honestly, like this stripping process of ourselves in the midst of learning how to be completely dependent on him. But I love what you were saying about how in that journey, how you got to show up was for in biblical language, like love the least of these, right? Like the people who maybe didn't have the same opportunities. And your perspective there is what really led you to creating this company, this system, and helping other companies serve their people better, right? And so as you were talking about slamming the revolving door shut, walk me through, like, how does the system help with that? How do you alleviate some of that? Because I don't know about you. I feel like I've experienced in especially Christian organizations this sense of, I call it like a wake of destruction, which sounds awful, but I think sometimes we can be so focused on the mission that we forget about how to serve our people. So when you're talking about slamming the revolving door shut, how do we take care of our people? How do we support them? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think every leader wants to, or I'll say this, pretty much every leader that I've talked to wants their people to feel cared for, to feel invested in, and to feel valued. Like that's where their heart is. The problem is that you typically have a bunch of systems supporting your business. So for us, we had tons of drive-through systems, tons of kitchen systems, tons of procedures on how to do everything. And so your thought and mind goes to, okay, here are the systems. And then you kind of put the people in kind of the time you have left over. But a lot of business owners and a lot of leaders don't have a ton of extra time, right? And so they still care for their people. They're but they don't have a system to actually make it where those one-on-one meetings happen every 2 weeks. Everybody on their team has a goal and has a leader pouring into them, mentoring them to help get their goal. They want to give feedback, but a lot of organizations have stripped feedback down to a end of year review where it's like, okay, there's no time to change and improve. There's no time to figure out what are strengths that I can maximize and what are weaknesses or poor behaviors that I need to cut out, right? And so we created systems where you can do that quarterly and everybody knows exactly where they're at and how they can get better, right? And so I think that's the interesting thing is that to become more human in terms of I want to care for my people, I want to invest in my people, you almost have to create a system which can feel very inhuman, right? It's kind of like I want to be organic and natural with my relationships. Yeah, but if you want to actually like invest in people and form relationships, you probably need to like go to a small group every week. And that can feel less human and less natural, but it actually drives the relationship. And so I think in order to build these relationships, you need to create real hard systems that support the soft, right? It's really hard work, but soft work of building relationships on your team.
Yeah, that's so true. I love what you're saying of like, you have to have those consistent rhythms and check-ins. You can't just set it and forget it. Like, that's the beauty of automations is we live in a society where we can set it and forget it, but you can't do that relationally. We need constant check-ins. And you think about children, not to compare ourselves as children as grown adults, but we still have tendencies, right? You think about children, they need structure. They need
Yeah.
consistency and reinforcement, right? And there's a lot of us that still, I'm a words of affirmation person. Like having those check ins and having that reinforced motivates me. And so I think, to your point of having these consistent check ins and rhythms, like I remember having one on ones with one of the companies that I worked for, and we had two a month. It was every other week. One of those was merely a check in. How are you personally? We're not going to talk business. I just want to know, how are you doing? What do you need help with? What's going on? And then the second one was an expectation, like a clarifying, here's where we are, here's where I need you, here's some things that maybe we need to shore up. And that clarity and feeling like there was a personal connection and you cared about my personal life and what was happening made me feel seen, and then created the value of, okay, now I know where I'm headed and how to perform better. And so there was clear trajectory, clear expectations. It made working there a true joy. So how does this system create that check-in rhythm, and what practices would you tell leaders that are good tools to use within the system?
Yeah, so it just tracks your efforts. So it makes sure that everybody's meeting with their mentor at least once a month. Everybody has a goal. Everybody's receiving feedback at least once a quarter, and then everybody's watching learning videos to kind of take them to the next level in their performance. And so that just helps you track, okay, I want to do this, but am I actually doing it? Because a lot of times what I found is we overestimate our efforts if we aren't measuring them. And it's like, oh, I definitely met with that person. But that was at the beginning of July. Wait, we're in August? It's the 8th of like, where did the month go? Right. And so if you don't have those reminders of I'm doing this or I'm not, it can be really hard. But like Michael Hyatt says, what gets measured gets done. And so if
Mm.
you're actually measuring, okay, is everybody on my team doing this? And as a business owner using our system, you can check and see who is doing this, who haven't had their meetings, all of that. The other side is that sometimes those conversations are hard. right? And people don't always know how to talk to each other or coach one another because that's never been a requirement for them. Most leaders get promoted because of their technical skills and are finding their way in the more emotional intelligence side. And so we provide templates that help, right? And so it's my job to kind of partner with you to figure out what do you want those conversations to look like because you know your culture a little better than I do. But then it's you and I working together to figure out, okay, how do we create some meeting templates that we can distribute to your team that allows them to guide those conversations? Took a bunch of 16 to 24-year-olds who don't know how to talk to each other and who, if you believe in stereotypes, just sit on their phones all day because they're scared to talk to each other. And a couple months down the road, they were ignoring our templates because they were just having wonderful coaching and mentorship conversations because we gave them a safe place to practice and a safe place on like, hey, here's how to do it. And what I've found working with Gen Z a lot is that they are desperate for relationship. They're desperate for true feedback and not just the you do you, your life's great. They're going, no, it's not. Like, help. But a lot of people are ignoring them because they don't always know how to bring it up. And to be real, at 18, I didn't either when everybody was crapping on millennials. And so it's like, okay, how do we just say, how do we not expect young people to have all the answers? How do we, as people who've lived a little more and figured some stuff out, make it a little easier for them to learn and grow and develop into wonderful human beings?
Yeah, I love that. I think the cadence of communication creates the trust and safety to be known, and
Uh-huh.
then allows you to show up in a place where you can grow and say, I don't know the answer to that, or feel like your people are approachable, right? Like I remember when, leading a team, there were times where you have to have a hard conversation and you're like, I work really closely with these people. This is going to be uncomfortable. But I learned the art of doing a reverse 90-day review. So at 90 days, I let my team review me. So after they had been working for me for 90 days, they got to give me their feedback. And it really broke down silos because they felt like I was approachable, right? And like some days I was a little moody, let's be honest. As a leader, you get stressed out, you got a lot on your shoulders. And so it became a running joke. I love tea. And so my team would be like, hey, Whit, I think it's time for a McAllister's break, And that was their way of being like, you're being a little high maintenance. Please step out of the office and go take a minute. But they had that relationship with me because they knew in giving me feedback at 90 days how I would react to their responses. And there was safety then and trust that was created. And so I think to your point, creating templates and resources where communication becomes a natural flow and you know where those thresholds and barriers are, and it gives you the safety to experience how are people going to react when I do this action. And now, okay, I know my thresholds, or I have complete trust that I can show up, I can be vulnerable and say, I messed up, or I don't know how to answer this. Or when there is conflict, it doesn't feel forced. It's a very
Mhm.
natural, like, hey, if you can call me out and tell me go get tea, then I can say, hey, let's talk about this. There's something that's amiss here. How do we work through this? And it just becomes a much easier flow of conversation, but it takes those intentional investments. So I love that you're doing that. You did mention Michael Hyatt, which you mentioned this in a prior conversation, totally offline of the podcast, of how you don't change your goals every year is one of your like favorite quotes from him, I think. So let's talk about that. Like the system, creating these relationships, like all of that takes a ton of strategy. It's not, Rome wasn't built in a day. Relationships and organizations aren't changed in even a year. And so, how does this intentional workflow help increase stability in organizations?
Yeah, I think at Chick-fil-A we were prone to, okay, every year we're shifting goals and trying to figure that out. A lot of times October is like a prime planning season for most organizations, right? They've done a little reflection in, July, August. October is where they start planning. October is where our business really picked up. And our sales would increase, 20% from the month before. Instead of doing $1 million in sales, you're looking at 1.2, 1.3 million in sales, and everybody's stressed and maxed out, right? And so we found ourselves a lot of times planning and setting goals for the year in February because November got busier and December was crazy and you've got holidays and we're doing lots of catering and all that. And then January, you're trying to catch your breath and everyone going on vacation and trying to figure out what's the new year going and then school's back in session and all that. So like we set goals in February. And so I think really were setting goals for almost like a 6 month period, like February to October, and then October, November, December, we're just rolling on all cylinders, right? And so I think adopting a longer term vision and saying, okay, what do we want to look like as an organization in 3 years? And what do we need to look like as an organization in 5 years? And some of that can be projection, and so you'll need to modify that along the way because crazy things happen. COVID happens, and suddenly you're like, I don't know what 3 years from now will look like, right? Um, but I think adopting that larger scale mindset also creates less of like a pivot where it's like, okay, we finally got our team all headed in this same direction. And now we're right when like we're doing the best momentum with that goal, we're trying to redirect them. And it's like, okay, we just got the ship pointed in the right direction and did tons of work to do that, to align the sales, rudder, all that, right? Align every part of the organization. And then as leaders, we're at the top where we've been practicing this goal all year. And then we're coming in and saying, hey, frontline team member who just now got this concept, let's go a totally different direction. And they're blindsided and going, man, we're working on speed. Now you want us to work on accuracy? Well, which one is it, right? And that can create tremendous confusion. And so I'd say that setting longer term goals and communicating them just helps your team not experience whiplash. Because you at the top who created and believe in this goal understand it on a better level than anybody else in your organization. And no matter how good your communication structure is, most people don't like change. And when you're constantly whiplashing them back and forth, they don't know how to follow you.
That's so good. That and it creates burnout, right? Because we're constantly pivoting and trying to appease, and you can only sustain that for so long. And then you're like, I'm burnt out. I don't want to keep doing this. I'm going to go find somewhere else that I can go and feel more supported. I think the other part of that, too, from a strategic planning side, like shameless plug here, real quick. If you need facilitation help to get that strategy done, holler at me. But um, if if you're planning these goals, but then maybe you focus on it for a year and then you're shifting the goals for the next year, you keep moving the needle. Yes, it creates that burnout and the inconsistency or whiplash, as you called it, but it also, like, you invest a whole year in these goals and then you're changing the target, but you're not going back to make sure that you're still keeping the consistency and following through on the previous year's goals. And so you spend a whole year investing in change that maybe you affected some change, but now you've moved the target and that's gone away. And then it feels like, well, that was a year wasted because now look where we are. It's not even that effective. And so goal planning has to be stacking, like James Clear's habit stacking,
Hmm.
the 1% changes, like keeping your eye on the prize and making sure that you're continuing to invest in what you've already invested in, I think makes a huge difference. So I would assume the system kind of helps with keeping the eye on the prize there as well, or what's the benefit of goal planning in the system?
Yeah, so what I would say is that the more times that you remind your team what the goal is, the more likely they are to accomplish it. And being able to create an environment where every time they have a meeting, they're being reminded of their goal. Every time they're checking their task list, they're being reminded of their goal. Every time they're giving or receiving feedback, they're being reminded of their goal. Every time they're watching videos to develop themselves, they're being reminded of the goal. And those can be organizational goals, but they can also be personal or professional goals, which I support because if they're a better person, they're going to be a better employee. And so we want everybody on our team developing themselves personally as well. But I think that's where I see a lot of organizations miss the mark is they bring up goals in their like executive team meeting and you have a company of 50 people and you've got five executives And every week they're talking about the goal. And so they think we talk about the goal all the time. And 45 people went to a kick off the year event. The founder, who's not the best communicator, kind of laid out the goal, but also made some weird jokes and like a Dallas Cowboys reference. And it's like, I don't know what part of that we're supposed to get, but I feel great. We were excited for the year. We got free food on a Sunday. Let's go. And then the executive team halfway through the year is going, man, why aren't we moving closer to our goal? Our team says they don't know, but we're communicating about it all the time. And really, they're just talking amongst themselves and not actually pouring it down into their team. And so just having that visualization and creating an environment where if you're doing anything connected to growth, you're also being reminded of what we're setting out as an organization to accomplish really helps um, drive progress and achievement because people understand it. Also, one of the wonderful things we found was that sometimes your frontline team won't understand what a goal actually looks like for them, right? And so if the goal is like, we want to achieve for us, like we had productivity goals so that we weren't wasting labor, right? And so it's like, okay, we want a labor productivity of $82 per hour, which is $82 of productivity for every person per labor hour. And so, we'd list that as a KPI. And then you'd have a team member go, what does that mean? And we'd go, oh, this is right. But they could ask that question, and then their mentor would break it down and say, okay, we have to do, if there's 20 people on shift, we have to do about what $1,600 in sales to afford everybody. Otherwise, we have to increase sales or send people home or something. But it created a opportunity in a safe environment to ask those questions because again, at the beginning of your meeting, when everybody in the organization's there, it's really scary to go, I don't know what any of the words you just said meant, and I don't know how my job relates to them. But when it's a one-on-one, you can ask that question and they can go, okay, this is what we have to do. And this is why we do certain things. And this is how you selling sandwiches directly benefits everybody in the organization. And if we can do that faster, that means we can have more money, have more people on shift, which can make it less stressful for you, that sort of thing, and be able to break down those goals in simple terms where people actually knew this is why this is important for me, who's not drawing profit, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, man, there's so many things. Like my brain's going in multiple different directions. So to your point of like it gets stuck in the exec level team. Like I one time left an organization and the like leader was like, I'm kind of pissed at you. Like, why are you leaving? Like we were planning plans around you. And I was like, that was not the conversation that I had. And so it was like the conversation was being had up here, but it wasn't coming down to the level of the organization I was at. And so I was growing disgruntled and ended up leaving when plans were being made for like an elevation of that, And so it was a little bit disheartening at that point of like, wow, I really wish that had been better communicated. But you think about with sales, we say this in entrepreneurship all the time, right? It takes 8 to 10 touch points for somebody to realize, one, to remember you, but two, to recognize I need you. I need your help. And so when you think about that from a goals perspective, like if it's going to take 8 to 10 reminders and check-ins on like, this is how this is relevant. This is what we need you to do before your team finally goes, I think I get that. Now I remember it. And I think I understand how it relates to me. This makes sense. So yeah, I love all of that you're saying. And then I think the other thing is like communicating the why. Like, why does this matter? Because again, similar, I have so many organizational stories. Leadership's fun, but like the story of like, somebody rolling out a new product and talking all about how this was going to like save the organization. I'm trying to be like general
Yeah.
in my context clues. And then talking about budget cuts. And so they spent the first 45 minutes talking about this new product and how it was going to save us. And then they spent 10 minutes talking about budget cuts and how it was going to affect everybody and left no time for Q&A and left everybody on the note of, oh my gosh, what's happening? What are we going to do? because the product development felt far off, too long term, and it created this incredible tension, right? And so it was like, what if we had reversed the order? What if we had said, here's the reality, here's where we're at. We gotta take some hits, but guys, here's the long-term vision, here's where we're going. And yeah, it may require some sacrifice for you right now. It may require some overtime, heavy lifting, but this is going to create X number of positions for our organization as we get there, right? And like really create the big picture, explain the why behind it. But I think for too many of us, we're just firing off, right? And we're like, I've got to go to this next meeting. So I'm just going to throw this dart at you real quick. Here's the information you need. Take care of it, deal with it without communicating the why. And so then we just get caught in this like, okay, what am I supposed to be doing with this? And how does this relate to me? And there's not enough touch points and follow up to help it settle in.
Yeah. And I just add that the why needs to be their why. Why should
Yeah.
they care? Because I think some businesses communicate the why effectively. And it's, well, I'm the owner and I want to make more money. So of course we need productivity to be up. And that's the unspoken reality. Okay, so what's a why for a team member? Why should I work harder so you can afford another house or a boat or whatever, right? Um, and so we'd go, okay, so for you want a raise, right? You've been vocal about wanting a raise. Okay, so to do that, that money has to come from somewhere, right? And Brian probably isn't going to okay a raise if it means he's going to make less money, right? It doesn't really make sense for him to lose money and everybody else to make money. It makes sense for him to make money, more money, and us to make more money, right? Fair. And so it's like, okay, what if we focus on productivity and we're able to elevate that a little bit? Why do we want to do that? Because that makes more money. And when there's more money to go around, everybody can get a raise. So for if you want to get a raise, we need to work on our productivity. And being able to break it down where it's not just a organizational why, but it's a why should you individually care? And being able to break it down on that minuscule of a basis, which gets hard when there's 1,000 people in an organization, but still being able to figure out, okay, how can I communicate this in a way that doesn't just resonate with us at the top level, but resonates it with everybody in our organization where they can feel it and get behind it because really they're going, okay, this is about me.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a professor in college that used to always say everybody's favorite person to talk about is themselves. So if you want somebody to feel important and remember you, make them feel important by talking about themselves, asking them questions about themselves. But to your point, like make the goal personal, make it about them, and they'll work hard for it because they understand how it relates. So you talked about purpose and autonomy and like different things. What are some things that leaders can do to help them lean into those? Do you call it intrinsic, or what was the word you
Intrinsic.
intrinsic motivated? Okay, motivators. Like, what are some things that like practical tips that they can take, and then how is that trackable, or how does the system help support that?
Yeah. So for one, just in terms of purpose, right? Most leaders want to invest in and help other people achieve a better life in some way, right? That's typically a primary motivation besides I just want to make more money, right? Which helps. But in terms of like, okay, I want to make more money, but what do I want to do? I want to make a difference in my team. I want it to be well led. I want everybody to be happy, all that. And so when they're sitting down across from these people, and the transformation that we saw that was the greatest was when a leader was helping a team member achieve a personal goal. Right. It had nothing to do with work. It was, hey, let's help you save $1,000 for an emergency fund. Or, hey, you want to go to college, but like you're too scared to take this leap. Let me talk you through it and get your resources and connect you with people that can help and let's figure this out, right? The team member felt valued and they weren't going to leave for 50 cents an hour anywhere else because somebody actually cared about them, not just their work output. The other side of that was that the leader felt purpose and they felt fulfilled because they were helping somebody reach their goals, reach their dreams, and they got to play a small part in making the world a better place, right? And when they were going, oh, I really like this because I can directly see the impact I'm having on the people I'm meeting with. That was really cool. And that's actually why we call it Hourglass, is because as that leader is pouring and investing in their team member, we think of that as sanding and flowing from one side of the hourglass to the other. But the reverse is true, is that leader's finding fulfillment and purpose. They're getting better at these conversations. They're feeling invested in as well. And so the sand flows the other way. And so the hourglass is constantly flipping back and forth as both sides grow and are fulfilled.
I didn't know that that was your reasoning behind your name and logo, but that is so cool and it's so true. Okay, so for sake of time, let's talk about, here's a question I like to ask everybody because as leaders, entrepreneurs, we all come against fears or obstacles or limiting beliefs, things that trip us up at some point in the journey, right? So, what is something that you have had to overcome? And like, what is a piece of advice you would give? And maybe it's from a leadership perspective or personal experience of how do we work through that?
Yeah, I would say that imposter syndrome is huge. And that I, like, this morning before the podcast, like, I was feeling it on a deep level. And I was imagining conversations with people that I'm meeting next week who own some pretty large coaching companies that we're trying to partner with and who have been multi-unit operators and have achieved all this success. And some are like, well, do we kind of build out a, competitor to Hourglass, that sort of thing, and just kind of feeling like I don't belong. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, you just get that sick feeling in your stomach and the tightness in your chest where you're just going, why in the world did I ever set out on this venture? Like, why? Like, this was stupid. Like, can I just go back to the safety of a nice, cushy job? Like, I took a 50% pay cut to now feel like I'm drowning some days, right? And so it's one of those things where it's like, who takes a 50% pay cut to feel worse? That's a terrible move, right? But I think in that, like, as I talk to other entrepreneurs and stuff, like, everybody who has achieved all this success is a very normal person. And like the other day, I was like, oh, do I send this message to a guy or not? And he had like 15,000 followers on LinkedIn, like worked for a huge company doing leadership development. And I'm like, man, I'm too scared to do this. Well, then he messages me like a goofy message. And I was like, and we had a good conversation. And it was chill and like nothing business wise came out of it, but it was like that hugely successful guy is a person too. And like through the years, I've gotten to meet some of my like leadership development heroes. I've got to meet Jeff Henderson. I've had the pleasure of meeting with Michael Hyatt. We brought him to Abilene and took him to a steak joint and all that. So it was the best steak he's ever eaten. Which again puts you, even if you're a millionaire who can eat at any steak place, sometimes you travel to Little Abilene, Texas, and find out that we do steak better than you do. But it's funny because you meet these people that you think are otherworldly and have it all figured out, and you realize, wait, you have the same fears and anxiety as I do. Like, you're worried about getting enough sleep before speaking to make sure you have enough energy, and that's what we struggle with too. And so, what I would say is action and anxiety can't coexist. And so, when you're taking action
Oof.
on things, you are fighting off that anxiety and you are leaving no place in your brain to feel petrified, right? So, do it scared, right? I grew up cliff jumping, and it wasn't that I loved heights, it was I loved the thrill. But every time I jumped, I did it scared. And so I think the same thing is with businesses or reaching out to that person. Just do it scared. I'd also just say that, like, sometimes just connecting with other people who are going through the same thing and you realize, wait, I'm not alone in this. Because I think that's a big voice of like everybody else is having a wonderful time and I'm the only one fighting off tears. It's like, no, wait, that's you too, and like you're running a very successful thing, or like you're just in the same boat as me. Helps you understand that it's like, okay, everybody's an imposter to a certain point because they're trying to do bigger things than they're currently at. And so it's like, okay, let me not become petrified. Let me keep moving because I know that everybody else is just as scared and uncertain about the world. Um,
No, I love that. And it's so true. That is something I've really had to wrestle with is it's not that these people who are super successful are like just 1,000 times smarter than me. It's that they're that much more courageous than me. They're willing to go after it. They're willing to put themselves in uncomfortable positions and go after it. And that is the difference. And so, yeah, I love what you're saying. There's so much value and action and anxiety cannot coexist. I was like, yeah,
yeah,
that one gets me a lot. So I'm
I
gonna have
do
to
have
write
to
that
give a
like
shout
on
out to my
sticky note.
therapist who told me that line. So, because
I
it
love
was
it.
like,
It's gonna go on my mirror on a sticky note next.
yes, you do that too. Okay, I'm
That's
not the only crazy one who puts encouragement sticky notes on the mirror.
no. Have you ever read the book Soundtracks by John Acuff? I love John Acuff stuff, but he wrote a book called Soundtracks, and it's basically like the limiting beliefs, like these things that are constantly on replay in our head, and how we have to create new soundtracks and like the neuroplasticity, like change the direction of our minds, right? And so he's a big like affirmation guy. And I'm not a huge affirmation person, but when there are things that is like anxiety is a big deal for me. And, it's like, okay, I need to put that somewhere where I constantly remember that I can spin out an anxiety or I can take action and move the needle. But the two cannot coexist. Like those types of things when I am spiraling and it's visually there is like, all right, I got this,
Yeah, I
So
love it.
cool.
Yeah.
Well, what else? I know we're kind of up to time, but what else would you maybe recommend to a leader or an employee, or just what have we not covered yet that you think would be really beneficial to share?
It's a good question. Ooh, I would say that leadership takes tremendous practice. And a lot of
Oof.
times when people get promoted or they take a next step, they assume that they'll be better at it than they are. And then when they aren't good at it, they kind of go, well, that didn't work. Let me ignore that that sound practice from a leadership guru and just kind of like not try it. And it's like, okay, yeah, that hard conversation did go a bit sideways, but overall, communicating with both honesty and respect is still a great guiding principle. We're going to try it again. You're just bad and you need to get better. And that's not a bad thing. That's not anything about you. That's just you need practice and you need time to improve. Which at Chick-fil-A, we had 2 weeks of training. And then this wasn't official, but we would say for the next 2 months, you're bad. And that's not your fault. That's not anybody's fault. You don't have the same muscle memory as everybody else does. And while you were training, it felt good because there's somebody actively coaching you. And at the very worst, they can step in and fix the disaster you caused, right? But after that, you don't have that. And so you're just going to be bad and it's going to be hard and difficult. And don't give up, don't quit, just get in those reps. And I'd say the same thing about leadership is that even if you've been through a leadership class or read some books and are trying to apply their principles, you'll probably have a couple months or a year where you're just bad. And that's not your fault. That's not a thing to hold negatively about yourself or a future reference. You just need to practice. And so jump into those hard conversations. Get as many reps in as possible and reflect on those, and you'll find yourself growing way faster than the people who want to play it safe.
Yeah, man, I love that. I've always said I think one of the greatest markers of maturity is being able to apologize. It's being able to put my pride aside and say, I missed on delivering this the way that I should have. Like let me own my part and recalibrate because I overreacted or maybe didn't handle this, whatever the case may be. It creates that trust and that safety. But I like what you're saying too about creating the safety in the sense of here's your expectation. For 2 months, you're going to suck. And that's okay. Going back to John Acuff, I love the quote by him that's like, be brave enough to suck at something new. But I don't think a lot of places give you the freedom to suck for a little bit. Not the kindest words, but whatever. They
Yeah.
don't give you the freedom for that. And so you feel like you're failing constantly. And then I think going back to the expectation, like in my own journey, I think I grew really disgruntled with upper level leadership at times because my expectation of how they were going to help me wasn't fulfilled. But it wasn't necessarily a communicated expectation. It was an assumed expectation. And so I think communication is a big part of creating aligned expectations and the safety to be able to feel like you can fail safely. So, man, that's so good.
Yeah. Yeah, it was
Awesome.
always funny because people would go, Kyle, I'm not good at bagging. And we'd just go, yeah, why do you think you should be good at bagging? They'd be like, well, Sarah's good at bagging. Yeah, she's done this for 14 years. You've done it for like 14 times. She's done it like
Yeah.
10,000 times. And within that are like 50, 100,000 reps. And it's like, don't compare yourself to somebody. Just go, okay, where am I today? And how do I get a little bit better each day?
Those one-liners. I'm gonna have to put that on my mirror too. Should get a little better every day. Don't compare yourself. Those are such good reminders, but they're so hard to keep at the forefront sometimes because, especially in our world and social media, like everything is shouting at you all the time. And to feel like you can show up without feeling the imposter syndrome, you got to remember that, like little by
Yeah.
little, it adds up.
Yeah, I'm much better at preaching it than practicing myself. Where like yesterday I was like, man, why does this guy his posts always do well? And then I looked at it and his posts he had 15,000 more followers than I do. Or sorry, yeah, 15,000 more followers than I do, 15 times the followers basically. And I was like, that's why his posts have more likes and views. Okay, it's not me. It's just I was like, be like a pee-wee football team. Like, why aren't we as good as the Dallas Cowboys? And there's no logic there, but I think a lot of times we can look at and go, why am I not as successful as this person? And most times it just comes back to time and consistency. And oh, they've been doing this consistently for so much longer than I have. That's not a fair comparison. But we still feel that
Yeah.
guilt and anxiety when we look out.
So true. Perspective and reframes are becoming two of my favorite things as a coach. Like keeping it in perspective, keeping the focus on what really matters, and then reframe what you see as negative. Like you just said, you're like, hey, look, I can aspire to get there, but I'm in a different league and my views are actually pretty great for where I am. So I'm going to celebrate that instead of being like, oh, I'm not, I'm not comparing to this guy. Like I should get there. It's like within reason. Yeah, I'll get there one day, but I'm going to celebrate where I am now.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights. And I know you have an incredible system, and we didn't get to coaching. So, if people want to get in touch with you to learn more about the system, maybe get a demo or whatever that looks like, how is the best way for them to get in contact with you to talk more about what you offer?
Yeah, so I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you can reach out to me there. You can email me at kyle@hourglass-leadership.com, or you can check out our website, which is hourglass-leadership.com, and there's a like scheduling event page there where you can schedule a demo. But any of those options work, and I'm pretty responsive, so I'll get back to you.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much for being a guest and just a friend and all of your incredible insights. It's truly been a joy getting to know you. And I know everybody who gets connected with you and learns alongside you will be blessed.
Well, thank you for having me.